May we like
Great. Thank you. So today is February 16th, 2022. The time is 5:07 p.m. and I am calling to order the Baldwin Park City Council virtual special meeting. City Clerk, can I have a roll call?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Alejandra Avila.
Here.
Councilmember Monica Garcia. I believe it was announced that she would not be able to attend the meeting.
Okay. So I'll make it, and I believe Councilmember Hernandez is running late if he hasn't already logged in. So I'll make a motion to excuse Councilmember Garcia, and Councilmember Hernandez will be a couple of minutes late.
He's actually here already.
Oh, great. So just Councilmember Garcia, can I get a second?
Second.
Any objections? If not, City Clerk, please continue.
Thank you. Councilmember Paul Hernandez.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Daniel Damian.
Here.
And Mayor Emanuel Estrada.
Here. Thank you for that. And at this moment, we will move to open public communications. Chief Deputy City Clerk, is there anybody looking to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we have Mr. Greg Tuttle, Mr. Rios. I will dial Mr. Greg Tuttle first.
Move.
Hello.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Tuttle. This is Lulu calling you from the city of Baldwin Park regarding your 3 minutes to speak at the special meeting.
Okay.
Okay, your time begins as soon as you start speaking. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm talking about the vendors today because that's on your study session. First of all, let's understand the vendors pay no taxes to the city. The vendors have no permits from the city, want to use business and residents' monies to have the city help them get legal, which they'll never do, and they'll never pay taxes. City has a huge liability by not enforcing the law that's on the books for serving food which isn't certified by public health to someone. And if someone gets sick from food poisoning or dies, the city's going to hang the bill on this because guess what? They go for deep pockets because we know the vendors don't have any money. The city's been warned several times that these vendors do serve poor food and people are getting sick, and you need to do something about it to protect the residents. The businesses are tired of you supporting vendors that are illegal after they pay all their taxes. The county health department, the state department, they don't care. They pass the buck on to the city. Monica Garcia, one of the dumbest council members on the council right now, understands the law. You enforce it, and that's what needs to be done, Mayor. When you get in here and you say that this is a political thing about us asking you to enforce the code that's here is wrong. It is not a political item. You need to enforce the law and make sure that the public sidewalks and the food that is served to the public is safe. But you're not doing that. You're more worried about upsetting these vendors that pay nothing here. They come from outside this city and they're not permanent residents in this city. You need to support your residents and business in this city. Also, the people I've contacted, the people that write up that sue cities for handicap things, where they come into restaurants and they say you don't have handicap bathrooms, they don't have handicap railings, and they don't have handicap signs and stuff, and parking spaces. They're willing to come in here and start suing the city for every violation of a vendor sitting on the sidewalk. This city's going to be engrossed in a whole bunch of lawsuits. So if that's what you want, you're trying to get rid of all the past lawsuits. You're going to gain more. This needs to stop with these vendors now. You have to start protecting the people that are here and that vote in this city and pay their right taxes and pay for the license properly to own a business in this city. So stop protecting the people that are illegal and don't pay taxes, don't pay any of the fees that they should pay. And then they violate the people's rights of using the sidewalks up. We've got to start protecting the city here. And if you're not going to do that, then find a new job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tuttle. Next speaker is Mr. Rios. A minute. Hello, Mr. Rios. This is Lulu calling you from the city of Baldwin Park regarding your request to speak at the special city council meeting.
Yeah.
You may start speaking, and your time will start once you speak.
Okay. I want to talk about the street vendors. It's getting a little out of hand. It's been out of hand for a couple of months already. Thing that I noticed this past weekend, and I sent some pictures to Enrique, and a couple of locations that I saw, there was a handicapped person on his wheelchair, and he had to go to the street. That's not, paying the citizens and the house owners of Baldwin Park. We're paying for all that. We're paying for the streets, the sidewalks, and everything. But when I saw that, this is, you guys have to put a stop to it. All we're looking for is a lawsuit against the city for not following the rules and regulations that we already have in place. And I'm sorry to say it, but you guys are not doing your jobs. Anytime we have a meeting or anything, you say, okay, we're looking into it. We're going to change times. We're going to have the code enforcement come in at different times and everything. It's not doing anything. It's getting to the point when somebody gets hurt and they come and ask me, can I go to court with them and testify that you guys weren't doing your job? I'll be more than willing to do it. So, I'll leave it at that for right now. At the 7 o'clock meeting, I have other issues that I have. But open your eyes up. Do some for the community. Do some for the businesses that we already have in here, the restaurants and everything. All that revenue that vendors are doing, nothing stays right here in the city. So I'll talk again on the 7 o'clock meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rios. And that concludes public communications, Mr. Mayor. There are no other speakers listed.
Great, thank you. So at this moment, I will move to close public communications, and we will go on to our street vending update presentation by Ben Martinez, Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I got a new speaker here in my office. Hopefully I can be heard better. Thank you very much. We are happy to bring this latest street vending study session for your consideration moving forward with the street vending issue. We have with us our special legal counsel, Arthur Shin from Silver and Wright, who's been assisting us, along with our city attorney. And we also have Victor Vitamontes from my staff with us, who's been assisting, as well as Jose Martinez, our community enhancement supervisor, and his 3 officers, Carlos, Greg, and Melissa, who obviously are all involved and have dealt with street vendors in their various areas of the city that they work. So welcome everybody and thank you. I wanted to first turn the floor over to Arthur Shin to discuss. We supplied the City Council with a copy of the memorandum that he prepared that goes into some detail of some of the proposed municipal code amendments to make the street vendor chapter in our municipal code more coherent and easier to read and follow. But before we pass it to Mr. Shin, we will also provide a further update after he's done on the food event that we are planning. We have made connections and discussed this with the County of Los Angeles, and they're going to be assisting us with that effort. And then we will talk about the enforcement timeline, which is already underway. We'll talk about that later. and the notice, the warning notice and the flyers that we've created during that effort. So first and foremost, unless the CEO has any comments he would like to make, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Shin.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Mr. Martinez, can you go to the next slide, please? I'm here to talk about some of the changes I'm recommending to the Baldwin Park Municipal Code as it relates specifically to street vendors, sidewalk vendors. As the council is aware, there's been some changes to the state law by Senate Bill 946, in that the cities across the state are restricted in where they can prohibit street vendors from participating in things of that nature. Obviously, the city of Baldwin Park had certain geographic restrictions and licensing requirements and things of that nature in place before this all happened. But with the changes in the state law, it's believed that some streamlining of the current city code and implementing some of the changes brought by SB 946 were necessary. So I prepared the memorandum that I believe you have to outline where the changes I would recommend are. Mr. Martinez, can you move to the next slide, please? So basically, I want to start out by saying that the geographic restrictions that are in the current Baldwin Park Municipal Code are not in and of themselves offensive at all in any way. I think, though, that because of the language in SB 946 and the changes in the government code that it made, there are certain perhaps additional language that might be included that would assist in preventing any challenges to the municipal code as it's written. For example, one of the current code sections in 12202 states that there should be no street vending within 500 feet of a school zone, which, as I was stating earlier this morning to Mr. Martinez, there's obviously very good reasons why that would be the case. There's traffic reasons, there's safety for pedestrians, et cetera, things of that nature. But it's not specified in the current code as it is. Some of the recommendations I'm making into that section, as well as others, makes it clear that that the reasons why this restriction is in place is for public safety, for pedestrian safety, for traffic, for things of that nature. So you'll see some of those recommendations in the changes I've recommended here. The current Baldwin Park Municipal Code also has some of the restrictions on where sidewalk vendors can operate, as well as some of the requirements that they need to observe, all kind of jumbled into one section. That's 122.02. I believe that based on just the ease of looking at the municipal code in that manner, I felt it was better to separate your geographic restrictions apart from your requirements, your licensing requirements and things of that nature. So that's why I split 122.02 up into, I believe it's two different sections, with one section being your geographic restrictions, your school zones, your sidewalks, where you can and cannot operate, et cetera, that section. And then another section to deal with the different licensing requirements, the county public health endorsements, the food handling endorsements, those kinds of things in a separate section, just so it's easier to follow for anybody that's starting to looking into going to street vending. You can see that very clearly. Mr. Martinez, I believe the next slide, please. So the other changes that are necessary, I think I should have switched these two bullet points around. So let me talk about the penalties first. The current municipal code accurately states the penalties that are allowed for vending in violation of, for example, not being in an area that they're allowed, vending in an area they're not allowed to be, for example. But these changes in state law delineate those sorts of violations with violations for vending without a permit as required by the city. And since Baldwin Park is going to require a permit for street vendors to sell within the city of Baldwin Park, there are certain other penalties that should be delineated as well in the municipal code, just to align itself with current state law. Government Code Section 51039 also deals with the ability to pay. So essentially, if I'm pretty sure everyone's aware of this, I think this ability to pay determination comes up in other sections of municipal codes as well. If someone demonstrates that they have an inability to pay the administrative fine, then essentially the administrative fine is reduced to 20% of the scheduled amount. So if somebody is cited for vending in a park without when they're not supposed to, in violation of one part of the municipal code, I believe that's $100 fine. That would actually be reduced down to $20 if they were able to make the case that they had no ability to pay the $100 as set. So the current municipal code does not have that mechanism in there, and that's why that is something that I would highly recommend to be added into the municipal code as it is today, so that it's aligned again with state law. Mr. Martinez, next slide. I believe that's my 2 slides. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shin. So Mr. Shin's work has been documented in the memorandum that was distributed to the council. It is, quite detailed. I think we wanted him to explain, generally what he's proposing. If the council would direct us to bring back the specific amendments as the outline in the memorandum, and we're still looking at a few others too. We can do that at a future date, and the council can consider, said amendments. So why don't we take any questions or discussion regarding those matters at this time. Thank you.
Sure. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Avila.
So looking at what we have in place right now, Mr. Chin, those are the things that stand out. And Ben says you're looking into amending a few other things. Is it something that's important to have once we approve everything, or it's something minor that we can change later?
Well, in discussing with Mr. Martinez this morning, there were some discussion that came up that it would be beneficial to include. For example, there's a certain amount of space that you have on certain sidewalks that people are allowed to vend on. So for example, I believe there was one photo I saw of a sidewalk that was approximately 10.5 feet wide. If we're allowing people to operate on the sidewalk, obviously, that's fine. I wanted to look into for example, the ADA regulations and how wide a sidewalk throughway has to be in order to comply with ADA. Those kinds of issues. And, it might be as simple as writing another subsection to 12202 to basically say you can vend anywhere as long as there's a certain amount of space between the end of your cart or your table or whatever happens to be, to leave 4 or 5 feet of space to the curb line, for example. If it's that simple, then we can. Those are kind of the little tweaks that we're working on now. The heavy lifting, the revisions, the additions for based on the changes in the state law, I believe that's already in here. So it's the tweaking and a little bit of that kind of thing that needs to go on. That's pretty much all that's left.
But right now, the current code that we have, it does not allow that sidewalk vending, does it?
The current sidewalk vending law that you have now has a set of restrictions on where sidewalk vending can take place. And it has certain requirements, for example, that the carts need to be kept in commissary, for example, things of that nature. And the set of penalties that are the first set of penalties that are implemented for somebody who violates those provisions. There are certain changes that need to be made to comply with the current state of the state law, which is essentially, for example, the ability to pay determination. That's not in your current municipal code now. I believe that you need to put that in there to comply with state law and have a mechanism by which somebody can ask for an ability to pay determination. So.
Okay, and so the taco vendors that we have right now, which is probably one of the biggest conversations that we're having about, because they're blocking the sidewalks, and you say we need to go out and measure to make sure they're still in ADA compliance. We didn't have, if I recall correctly, those type of vendors were not allowed in the city, only the mobile ones, meaning the ones that are pushing their little carts throughout the city, but not in a stable place. Does our code say anything specific about that? Or can we specify a place where they can vend only and not allow them anywhere in the city? Like a specific, let's say we find 3 spots within our city and say on 3 different days out of the week, you're allowed to vend, but only in these areas. Can we do that?
Under this current state law, no. Basically, the state law essentially mandates the city to allow sidewalk vendors to vend pretty much anywhere they want to vend, as long as there are certain if there are restrictions in place. Like I said, you do have geographic restrictions now. You have you can't vend within 25 feet of a driveway, for example, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. If there's a specific health, safety, welfare reason why you have that restriction, then those restrictions are still allowed under state law, even as it currently exists. To say that a sidewalk vendor to a sidewalk vendor, now we're talking about somebody that is got their licenses, got their food handling permits. You got the cart is a legal cart. It passes compliance with the county of public health. It's a county public health department. All that to say that you can vend on this at this location on this day at this time is I'm going to say the word redundant, because because they're allowed to do that no matter what under the current state law, as long as there's no geographic restriction. Now, where I would caution the council is if you say you, Mr. Street Vendor, who has a legal cart with all your licenses, you can vend on in this area on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays between the hours of 8 and 5, and that's it, then I think you're going to run into a problem with state law.
Got it. And we're talking just about all these legal vendors, the ones that don't have any of their licenses, as long as they're not following our code and we're following state guidelines, that's when we start giving the warnings or citations, whatever it needs to be done. How about when it comes to vendors, because this is one of the complaints that we have heard, vendors being in front of another restaurant, for example, as long as they're licensed, they're still allowed to do that.
As long as they're licensed and they're not violating any other restrictions as to geography. For example, if the entrance to the restaurant happens to be right next to the driveway to the parking lot or whatever the case is, that might cause some problems for the street vendor to set up shop there. Because if you have a restriction that says you cannot be within 25 feet of, and this is off the top of my head, so please don't quote me on this, but you can't be within 25 feet of the driveway apron, and that particular location where that street vendor is within that 25 feet, then yes, that's going to be a problem. It's going to violate your municipal code. Now, you can change those geographic restrictions, by the way, or you can eliminate some. But just like looking at the restrictions that you currently have, I think those are well taken, and I think they should remain as long as we can find a way to save them based on the strictures of the changes in state law. So,
and maybe we can have a discussion on how we can restrict those vendors from being right adjacent to a restaurant where it might take their business. But just to make it clear, any vendor that has all the proper licenses are allowed to vend in the city of Baldwin Park, as long as they're following the 500-foot restriction from schools and they have all their permits. They're allowed to be anywhere in our city, correct?
Correct. I mean, I believe, and I understand that the animus from the community is such that you want to restrict the desire for at least business people might be to restrict them to certain areas or things of that nature. I would point out that very specifically in the changes in the government code, it does say that the community animus is not a reason, is not a health and safety reason. So that is, and I hate to put it this way, but it really is out of your hands. That's not something that the council can take into consideration when determining whether a person should get a license to be a street vendor. So,
and we can't limit the amount of street vendors we have in our city as long as they're licensed.
Correct.
Now, does that also, and I'm sorry, I'm taking too much time. Does that also include the truck vendors that are driving into our city and just parking on the street as long as it's a legal area to park?
That's a different issue altogether. Now,
okay.
If you're talking about food trucks, right? Mm-hmm. That's a different. You have a different section of the municipal code for that. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't take a close look at that one because I was looking at street vendors, sidewalk vendors specifically. But that's a different set of parameters that not just the city has, but the state has different rules for that. The county has different rules for that, and the as far as the Department of Public Health is concerned, there's very specific plans that are needed for those for those food trucks, as well as for the mobile food carts as well. But the food carts are probably going to be a little bit easier to get approved than the food trucks to have the burners, the refrigeration, and things of that nature. So if
I can ask you to look into that, because we do have some of those food trucks here in our city. There's only a couple, as far as I know. I've only seen a couple, but if you can look into that as well, I'd really appreciate it. So I just wanted to make that clear that vendors are allowed in our city as long as they have their licenses. Now, what does that, the vending, does that count for the flower vendors, the ones that sell little gadgets, whether they're lighted balloons or what have you? It includes all kinds of vendors, correct? Right. As long as they're permitted?
Right. I think, and just go back to your earlier point, SB 946 dealt specifically with the non-motorized food vendors, but I will take a look at the other things too. But to answer that question, yes, the changes in state law, the street vendor law, I should say, it doesn't matter what you're selling. And I know that when people think street vendors, immediately they go to the taco trucks, the hot dog stands, I'm from New York, the pretzel stands, things of that nature. So, those are the kinds of things that people automatically gravitate to. And hence you have the public comments where everyone's saying that these, they're unlicensed and things. And that might be entirely true, but it's not just limited to that, to food items. It could be your toys and trinkets. And in fact, this specific language in SB 946 states that the street vendors do sell other items that are of cultural significance for some people, and that's the only place you can get those items is through a street vendor who has them, maybe brought from another country, maybe made at home, things like that. So it doesn't have to be food specific. So that is true. One thing I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Councilmember Avila, just because of the Valentine's Day this past 14th on Monday, and even through the weekend, we realized that there was going to be quite a bit of activity of flower vendors.
Right. And,
our license, they're required to have a city license to be able to vend. So we, of course, let it be. We let it happen because we were focusing more on the food vendors for now. But we may have to update our municipal code for such things as flowers, because I think our municipal code right now does not allow for flower vendors, which may put it in conflict with state law.
Right. So based on what Mr. Shin said, any vendor is allowed to be in our city as long as they're fully licensed. And that's why I brought up the other vendors. I mean, every city, I'm sure all of you were in different cities this weekend. We're not the only city that has vendors. And the only problem that I see is when they don't have their licenses. And of course, we want everybody to have their proper licensing and paperwork for them to be in our city, because the state law says that we must allow them to conduct business in our city as long as they have all the proper documentation. So I'm thankful that Mr. Shin was here and clarified that and made that very clear that the state allows the vending. And we just have to, as a city, need to enforce and make sure that they are all holding their licenses to vend, and that if they are on the sidewalks, that they're ADA appropriate, that they're not taking too much space so as to make it maybe a safety issue for some of our residents. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shin.
Welcome. Welcome.
And then I just had a quick question. So we were talking about street vendors that are non-food, right?
Correct.
And so with non-food vendors, is it that all they need is to come to City Hall and just get a permit and then they should be okay?
Right. So essentially there's certain requirements that are listed in the amendments I've made, and some of them include getting your food handler's permit and things of that nature. Well, if you're selling toys or flowers even on the side of the road, then that's probably not going to apply to you, because you don't need a food handler's certificate to sell books or things of that nature. So that's not going to apply, but everything else would. But if a person wants to, for example, sell flowers on the side of the road, or open a little stand that sells flowers on a daily basis, it's the same process as far as the city is concerned, as far as the state's concerned. You get your seller's permit, you get your state ID, taxpayer ID number, or however that's going to work. You get your city Baldwin Park sidewalk vending permit, and then you can go about selling flowers. You can go about selling books, toys, whatever the case is. It doesn't, and my point is, it doesn't have to be food specific in the city. It's in the city of Baldwin Park or anywhere else for that matter.
Great. Okay. I think that's good to know, right? Because then we know how we can get them to either get permitted, and once we're out there and enforcing it, we can tell them, hey, I mean, if somebody's selling non-food items, there's no reason for you to be out here without a permit. I guess another question would be, we can't really limit too much, but, what about, for example, our downtown? Could we limit a portion of the city where you can't, as long as the majority of the city is open?
I would caution against that unless you can find a valid health and safety reason why you were not going to let vendors allow in those areas. Again, the state law is very, very clear that it wants to be as open as possible. And so if you say this area of downtown, you are not allowed to vend in without a health and safety reason for that, you might run into problems if someone challenges that. So I don't think that's the best methodology to do it. I mean, if there is a legitimate reason why you don't want people selling items on the sidewalk that's health and safety related, and that doesn't have anything to do with community animus, doesn't have anything to do with a restaurant having issues with vendors outside their place of business, then I think you were going to run into problems if you can, unless you can come up with that reason, I should say. So I would caution against that. I'll just leave it at that.
Mayor, really quick, a question on that. So I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but I believe our code right now says that they're not allowed to vend around our events. For example, our street market, our concerts in the park. Is that okay to do?
Yeah, that's fine. And there is, and I should have looked this up earlier. I apologize. There are some restrictions on that. You can do that. That's fine. Okay. But that restriction has to apply for not just street vendors, but every other vendor as well. So if someone has a food truck, for example, they have to be under the same restrictions as well. So
right. Anybody that's vending.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And just so you're aware, some of the other amendments I am recommending is some amendments to the definitions portions, because I don't think the current code defines what a farmer's market is, for example. It doesn't define what a cart is. And these are very specific to street vendors themselves. So those are the kinds of things I would recommend adding in there. And you brought that up with the farmer's market. So I thank you for that.
And then, so we could do that with any city event. I mean, you said there has to be a reason. So like, let's say, we're working on an event where we can have, we give the ability to food vendors to vend and get the permit so that we're able to, just so that everybody kind of gets, heard. So we could then enforce and say like, you can't vend anywhere near this because it's an open access event to everybody. So you cannot vend within a certain limit of that event.
Right. And if I recall correctly, there's one part of the government code that does allow you to say your street vendors, food trucks, nobody can vend in this area because of whatever reason that the city comes up with. As long as it relates to health and safety, I think it would be okay. So.
Yep, Mayor. So it's 1,000 feet. It's in our current street vendor ordinance. It's 1,000 feet. But again, so 1,001 feet, a legal vendor, street vendor, could vend from, an event or a farmer's market, right? But they have to be legal. So we know that, again, all the taco vendors that we're seeing on the sidewalk, which has been the explosion in the past few months, we've all seen, that they are not legal. There's really no way for them to become legal. You cannot open a kitchen on a sidewalk. It won't work. So they would have to go the route, the taco vendor that we're seeing out there, the larger ones, they'd have to go the route of buying a truck. We'll talk a little bit later about the food event. We're also will talk a little bit later about how we would love to assist vendors that want to become legal. We will work with them. We've learned a lot. We understand the process. We understand some of the purveyors of the food trucks, the carts, all of that. We've learned the whole process. So we'd love to show people that want to learn how to do it correctly. And we're going to offer that through a flyer. And, but yeah, the taco vendors that we're seeing on the sidewalk, just to be clear, there's no way for them to become legal the way they are operating.
So good point you made there, Ben. And I kind of was referring to that. Is it because there is no running water or anything like that in the areas that they're at? So there's no way we would ever be able to give them a permit, even if they have their food handling license or whatever you call it, because there's no running water in the area.
No bathrooms, many reasons.
And so maybe would that fall into my question that I had earlier about if we had certain areas where they can come and vend, where we would be able to, I'm not saying that we are, provide running water for them or bathrooms. Is that possible, Mr. Shin? Because how would they provide running water or bathrooms when they're on the sidewalk?
As far as, if I understand the question correctly, now, let me ask this. Are we talking about a taco vendor that doesn't have a license to operate in the city or doesn't have a food handler's permit? And you want to carve out an area for those individuals
So Ben is saying that there's no way we would be able to give them permits.
Correct.
To do tacos on our sidewalks.
Correct.
You're saying state law says we have to allow vendors in the city as long as they have licenses. Mm-hmm. But to sell food on the street, they have to have running water and bathrooms. That's what you said, correct?
Right. Right.
So how would we be able to provide licenses to these taco vendors that are on the sidewalks and they don't have access to bathrooms?
So basically, when I did the initial research on this, and I called the Department of Public Health, like LA County Department of Public Health, there's for a push cart, non-motorized push cart, and we're talking about so anything outside of a food truck or I guess a brick and mortar business, it's going to be impossible. That's basically what they've said. Now, that being said, you can still vend food from a push cart if it's prepackaged, for example. And I believe I want to say it was tamales that could be sold from a food cart, because it doesn't require any physical. No, I believe the way that they explained it, there's no physical touching of the actual food itself, whereas with the taco there is, and there's also it's basically reheating something, not as opposed to cooking something on the cart itself. So
although I think that's the very crux of the nature of the special event that we're proposing, working with the mayor on holding one such event, in which we will provide all of the other supporting requirements: bathroom, running water, electricity, and so on. So under those circumstances, county health does allow for a vendor to be able to do food, so long as they have an enclosure. You've seen it at the fairs, the county fairs, for example, or special street fairs, even including our own. They can prepare food inside of a tent, covered tent, with the netting, which is how we would be doing it. So that complies with all the county health. They don't have to have a food truck, but it has to be designated as a special event. And as you pointed out, Councilmember Avila, bathrooms and all the other things have to be provided.
So pretty much those taco people that are setting up tents and all that on our sidewalks, there is no way to license them because there's no way they have running water or bathrooms.
Correct.
Bottom line, correct?
Right.
Again, can we provide it once or twice a week where they can come in a section in our city where they can come in with licenses if we provide the running water in the bathrooms?
So essentially, the licensing itself would be done through the city, and as far as the state of, the county is concerned, day to day, you're not allowed to operate a taco stand, without the other necessities, the running water, the restrooms, the things of that nature. However, what it sounds like you're describing, council member, is a special event for food events,
vendors,
food vendors, and just like we were talking about with the county fair, that was a great example that Mr. Saldivar brought up. Obviously, these are individuals that are allowed to sell their foodstuffs at these events under licensing by the county, or at least by permission of the county. And
I think we lost Mr. Shin, but
you froze.
But yeah, that we could do it under a special event, and that's what we're gonna.
And that's the event coming up in May.
Such a special event.
Yeah.
They're limited to so many per year. I don't have that number. We'll have that at the next meeting, but they are limited. We can't do them every day.
Right.
And I suggest that you go to that, because if the mayor cuts us off at 6 o'clock, we won't be able to talk about our enforcement timeline and what we expect to do in the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
Can you go back to the PowerPoint real quick?
That's my belief, that they're licensed and permitted county. In the case, I see any reason why.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a few questions I'd like to ask our expert at some point before we move on.
Yeah, I don't know if he's on. I think.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now.
Okay, I think my internet's getting unstable here, so I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Okay. Just yeah, go ahead, Councilmember.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate the information that you have and that you're providing to us.
Of course.
When you talk about, if you can, really quickly, in regards to the stationary, the amount of time that an individual that is fully, licensed and so forth, that can stand or can stay at certain, sidewalks or whatever the case may be, what's the allowance that we can provide or do?
As far as the time, the amount of time that they're allowed to stay out?
Yeah, I mean, right now we have parking restrictions, right, in certain areas that, for whatever the case may be,
Sure.
whether it's 2 hours or whatever the case may be. Minus that, how long are we able to restrict the hours that somebody stays and are vending during this? Because
I don't see.
because I did read part of your memo did say that we can restrict the hours based on what we do for normal businesses around that. So I just need clarification on that, please.
Right. So I think what you're reading is that the fact that you can restrict the hours of a stationary vendor or any vendor for that matter, but it cannot be any more restrictive than your current businesses in that general area. So for example, let's say, generally speaking, the businesses on a certain area of where a certain number of restaurants are, you require them to shut down, let's say at 10 o'clock. You cannot require the street vendors to get off the street at 9 o'clock, for example. It has to be equal access to that same area is the way I read it. So.
Okay. No, that's great.
And Councilmember, to answer your question, the sidewalk vendors do need to keep roaming. You're not allowed to stop. They're not allowed to vend in any residentially zoned areas, except for roaming sidewalk vendors vending from the sidewalk and not blocking traffic. And roaming vendors shall keep moving and shall not be stationary.
No, thank you, Ben. I really appreciate that because that does clarify, some of the concerns that I'm hearing from our local residents and also businesses.
They can complete a sale, right, and then they move on. So you sell the ice cream or move on.
Right, and I do know the difference between as you talked about sidewalk vendors, whether it's someone selling trinkets or food or whatever the case may be. That I just want to make sure that we're mindful of those type of restrictions. Because again, I'm not looking to have a food operator at midnight or at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday in residential areas and so forth. One of the things that that we have here, and I like for additional clarification as we're going through the ordinance, is how do we define a residential neighborhood? If we can look into that, because we already have folks already operating in residential neighborhoods, and clearly no one, we haven't been advising around that in the past. So if we can just, I think that will save us a lot of headaches in the front or in the back end on that one. So the permits, county health. So again, what we're looking to do is, get those street vendors that are permanently, at least the ones that are tacos or whatever other foods that they're sending, to move them towards, being essentially micro entrepreneurs with our assistance and support to get them off those sidewalks and get them into a more permanent or successful business, whether it's, a cart, right? Because there are those county approved carts, whether they're selling tacos or whatever else they wish to sell. So I do appreciate that. The one thing is in regards to, the street, the city street event, the special events, one thing that we also have to think about, or that the county does require, is those individuals that participate in those special events do have licenses to vend. So these folks, whoever goes to these type of events, they will have to require to get those permits. It's, so they got to go through that process and pay for that. And of course, we're, I like to also know, as we're going through this process, when we talk about that event, what's that event going to look like and the cost, right? Just, it's good to know, because we also have to provide what we're not thinking about is also refrigeration for all these individuals and foods and so forth. So, we want to make sure that we're open to all the other folks and so forth. And the last thing I have is, how do we deal with, individuals? Because I thought in the county, there's a process, there's a law that allows for essentially home cooks, right? Individuals that want to cook at their home and sell some of their items or menu items to folks. Are they allowed to sell to residents, or is that towards deliveries or outside, or can they set up a little stand in front of their driveways and charge people and so forth?
Honestly, I don't think that would comply with if you start from the very, very beginning of the process, getting a state seller's permit, if they've done that. So the issue you're going to run into on something like that is obviously the health concerns that the Department of Health would have. I didn't look into it, to be honest with you, because I was looking at the food cart issue, or the sidewalk vending issue. But my understanding is that if you sell from a home kitchen or anything of that nature, you might run into some problems trying to sell commercially, for example. So
okay,
you can look into that.
If we can look into that, because there are folks that are selling tacos and so forth in their driveways. I know them, and they're good people, and they're aware, but they're also trying to get ends meet, but they're aware that the city is going to be changing, and they're looking to see how we can help them in the future anyways.
Sure.
And then the last piece, sorry about that, Mr. Mayor, the last piece is regarding taxes. How do we collect our sale revenue from these individuals, as small as they might be, and as large as some of these people might be?
So the premise of opening a business of this nature is that it is a business, and it's no different than if you're opening up a restaurant with doors and walls. It's the same process. You get your taxpayer ID number or your social security number or whatever tax identification number you're going to use. You have to get the permit from the city. And I didn't see it, but I'm sure the city has a sales tax as well that it's going to collect and things of that nature. So the comments I heard earlier about these individuals don't pay taxes. If they're licensed, they would need to. That would be one of the requirements that they comply with in order to maintain their license, maintain their business. So that it would be like any other business, and where their addresses is likely the residence, et cetera, that kind of thing. But I don't see any difference in collecting tax from the supermarket down the street versus the street vendor outside selling whatever he's allowed to sell outside, as long as they're going through the same process, or at least the.
Excellent. So one thing I'd ask for you and Ben to work on is if we can just add, a small line item in the updated ordinance, so it speaks to that you have to be in compliance, right, on these other permits to be able to renew. However the renewal process is, each, good standing and so forth.
Sure.
Because I think obviously there's many, just so you're aware, there's a couple of folks here in the city that started off going through this process many years ago, where things are a lot different, and they've been able to set up their own stores, food vending, and restaurants here in the city of Baldwin Park. So just there are success stories. It took them a long time, but they've done the work, and so it can be done.
That's the goal.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Great. Okay. So Ben, if you want to.
Yes, Mayor, I just very briefly talk about that we are planning a food event. We will be reaching out. It's to be held at the Cruz Baca Metrolink station parking lot in May of this year. We've already began discussions with the County Department of Public Health, preparing a preliminary budget, talking about how we're going to promote and show people, vendors, how to participate in the event. And also we've, with the assistance of Parks and Rec, we've also looked at, the logistics of the day and all the things that we're going to need, also Public Works. So we are working on that as we speak, and the county is we spoke to them today, they're going to assist us. The next slide is just going to be the enforcement timeline. We finished the educational period. So from June of last year to February of this year, we went through the educational period where we were not enforcing. We are now in the warning period where we are providing notices and moving vendors along, warning them. We're not citing them. This will end February 28th, 2 weeks from February 14th. This will end February 28th, where then we will start to enforce upon illegal vendors. And then the next slide, just wanted to show the flyer that we're going to pass out along with the warning notice. Again, our staff is eager to help illegal vendors understand the process and the requirements and the costs, and we're ready and willing to help. So we're going to pass out this flyer in hopes that they will call us. And I think the next slide is just a picture. Oh, there's the notice that the warning notice that we will hand out. And that's it. We do have a few pictures on the next slide just of the distance requirement to schools. And the next slide is the illegal versus legal cart. So you kind of get the idea. Those are the typical taco vendors that we've been talking about in this evening that open up on the sidewalk on a table. They're completely illegal. The cart there on the top left, that's illegal. And then the kinds of trucks and carts that are trailers and carts that are legal on the right and that are approved by the county. So I think we've gotten great direction from the council. In addition to the street vending revisions, we will look at the other areas that the council has instructed us to look at, including home-based businesses, non-food vendors, and the like. So I've taken good notes, and we will return with this, in the near future. In the meantime, we will start again. We'll continue the warnings to our illegal vendors. And then we'll make it very clear that on February 28th, we'll start enforcement. And it's not that they can say, so even starting this weekend, the vendors that are illegally set up will have to move. So we're not going to give them a warning and just walk away. They will need to move. We're going to do it though in a kind manner, respectful, passing out literature that we want to help, and talking to them and explaining why we're doing this. And we're hopeful that, compliance will, we've never had an issue generally with compliance, and we feel that we'll be able to move forward. So that completes our report and our discussion, unless there's any other questions. Thank you.
And I have a question, please. Oh, it'll be really quick, Mr. Hernandez. The flyer is very nice. Can we make it, or can we add to that flyer? I think some vendors may be worried that immigration status may be an issue. Can you put something on that flyer that there's no need to worry about the immigration status, and when it comes to the permits, it has nothing to do with immigration? Because I think some of them will be fearful. Some of them, remember, I think we had this conversation a few years back, they may not have a California ID to prove who they are. They may have a Mexican passport maybe, or some kind of ID to prove their identity. So if we can make it clear on that flyer, please.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Hernandez, sorry.
No, not a problem. Good items. Ben, we're going to have, just for clarification, you said this weekend, so we'll have staff available and out there this weekend on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays? Yes,
we're going to rearrange our staff hours and address the issue starting tomorrow.
Okay. And we'll also have some spot checks during the weeknights and also the following weekends? Yes, sir. We're definitely, we're going to do our best to cover. We know when generally when vendors set up, we want to, of course, find as many vendors setting up, so we don't have to ask them to, take it apart and move, and save them the time and the effort. So we'll be trying to enforce before they set up or while they're setting up, so we can have them move along if they don't have the proper permits. Nope, thank you. I just want to make sure that, we capture all of them. Some only come during the weekdays. I know of one, and some generally come on the weekends only. So just want to make sure we're fair to everybody. We will endeavor to be fair and do our best to get out there at all hours to be fair and get good coverage.
Yeah, one more thing, Mayor. I just want to add, I know I want to thank code enforcement, because I know they're going to have to shift their hours and their schedules to accommodate this new request, to make sure that we're following our ordinance and our state ordinance. So thank you in advance for being able to work with us and shift your hours to be able to be out there talking to the vendors. That's all. Thank you.
Mayor, I have a quick question for Ben regarding the food event update.
Okay.
I see on the timeline that you're talking about May. Has this been approved by the council yet? Has this been presented and approved by the council?
No, council member, we're thinking of May. We still need to get a lot more details. We don't have any of the details yet. We haven't started really the process, but I hope in March to bring back much more details and get a approval by the council of a budget of the official day that we will hold the event, and also discuss whether we'd like to just do one or, you know, continue to do more. For instance, City of El Monte did 2 months of events every Thursday for 2 months. So we could do something like that.
Got it. Okay, so it still has to come back with a proposed budget and council approval.
Correct.
All right, thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Great, thank you. So I believe at this point, we are ready to move on to our closed session. So we will recess into closed session and then we will see everybody else at the regular meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.